Now then, it's a beautiful morning. Yeah, the sky is a sort of pale blue, very light breeze, lots of sun. It's going to be a wonderful day. But we're starting another fixothon. I'll show you the reason why. It's not immediately apparent from the shot that you're seeing, but let's have a look. It's about, I don't know, 9 o'clock in the morning, right? And there's the, what I would call the solar boom, and the sun's over there. So in other words, it's facing the wrong way. So I've noticed a couple of times over the last few weeks that occasionally this has not returned to the start position for the morning. Should be facing the other way. So this is facing the evening sun at the moment. So let's have a look at the bits and pieces. I've already analysed it, but let's go and have a look anyway. For those of you who have not watched the back catalogue on this is loosely based on the old post mill, where you've got a post and everything spins around that. It's been modified over the time, and last year I took all the original panels off and replaced them with these panels here, which are all 30 volt, 250 watt. Anyway, the bottom line is that it's driven through a timer to this drive system here, and because this, for want of a better word, drive boom is quite long, it's quite a long arc for it to travel over 24 hours, so not much power is needed, but it's sticking now. If I was to set this on override and give the motor a little flick, it would run. So let's go and have a look at all this down here. So remove the railway shoe. There we go. I'm fully aware that the sun's behind me. So there's the motor down there, behind those tangled wires, and it has a chain drive. So there we go. And that chain drive goes through to that gearbox, which then drives this tyre. Okay, so we know we're getting power to the motor, and it's none of the reversing circuitry, which is what that tangled mess of wires is. It's just a piece of old circuit board with some fairly hefty diodes on it. So I think what we're going to have to do is have this motor off and have it apart. Maybe the gearbox has got dry, maybe the brushes are just starting to wear out. It has been on here for... You're going to have to go back and have a look at the back catalogue. But I'm guessing... Where are we now? 2018. Might be 10 years. So it's been running all that time with a minimum amount of maintenance. Just putting a bit of oil in the gearbox from time to time. And as you can see, I've got wooden bungs in there because this gearbox didn't have a filler plug at the right place. with it being in this orientation. So I just drilled a hole in the alley case and whacked a wooden plug in. That'll do. Yeah, so I'm going to take the motor off and then we'll be off in the workshop just to see what we can find. So I thought we'd do this outside. Always have a leg vise. Yeah. Great for putting starter motors in and all sorts of big chunky stuff. I've checked this battery. It's showing 13 volts. That seems to be fine. I suspect there's just tightness in here because it's 12 volts going from the battery shed all the way through various wires and everything. There's a lot of resistance in that circuit. So I think what we'll do is just basically, to start with, we'll have this gearbox case off and have a look. I can't see any immediate way of getting to the brushes unless we undo some of these screws and then this end comes off, and then it'd be a pain in the neck to try and get it back together. But got to do something. So we just wiggled this and it came out. There we go. And there's a little seal there. But as you can see, it's full of really nice sort of gooey thin grease. So there's nothing wrong with that. There's a couple of locating pins that go there and there. So, you know, it's not the gearbox that's tight. So we'll have to look elsewhere. It's obviously been working well. So we'll just put all that back together, and I suspect we'll have to try and undo these screws here and take the back off. So I've undone those 3 screws. Right. Okay, that's the worm gear, and I can see some, let me bring this round so you can see. Can you see there? Those are the ends of some screws. So obviously we need to take this black plastic cover off this other side. So I'm just going to put this back together to keep the muck out. Right, let's just have a look at this. I think there's a cap there. The beasties have been in there. And that's obviously a tacho with a reading head. And I wonder how that tacho is held on that shaft. There's no grub screw holding it on. I could cut through it to get rid of it. So I run the slitting saw down that and just split that off because it was on there mighty tight. And then just drizzled a bit of oil down there. And it's running nice and quiet now. So I think we'll just pack a bit of grease around that. I could take that out, and there are Torx there, but the problem is the biggest hassle with this will be getting the brushes back in. It's a permanent magnet DC motor, which is why when you turn the polarity round the motor goes backwards. But you can hear it's running a lot quieter now. Hopefully we might have cured it in the interim. I'll just leave that running for 5 minutes, pack some grease down in there and deep down these various screw holes that I think are blind. Yeah, so we don't need to do that, but I'll pack some grease around that shaft and put it back together. That's a lot quieter. So what I'm going to do now, before we go any further, I'm going to leave the camera running and then edit out a section. But I'm just going to go and put the override on, and because it's now about 12:30, the whole thing should go that way and the motor should start by itself. Let's go and see what happens. Greasy hands. Let's just zoom out a bit. I think we might have sorted that problem out for a while. And just whilst we're here, let's just move the camera back. And when the whole thing gets to the end, there's a microswitch there. And then when the polarity turns round, the diode lets the power through on a slightly different circuit, and the whole thing goes that way, goes back that way, and then there's another microswitch that stops it at the far end. I'm quite happy with that. All I need to do now is just flick the changeover switch over so we can wind the whole thing back so it's facing the sun. Whoopee! So it's the next day, and although I thought I'd fixed that motor, and it might very well be the case, it could quite well be there's also another fault, or maybe the motor wasn't at fault and there was a resistance in the line between the tracking timer and the motor, and it's quite a convoluted route, so we're going to have to get the multimeter out and the screwdrivers and track the power supply all the way through. First of all though, we need to go to the tracker timers and set the switch to manual override. So there's the controller box. As you can see, 2 timers, one for the boom, one for the gate. That's the forward and reversing relay, and these are the override switches. So gate, boom, so we'll stick the boom override on. Here we are again, got the cover off, the motor, etc. And let's have a look, let's get in there with the multimeter. So the thing that's confusing me is, or the thing that's happening is, it will go that way but not that way. Okay, so when you put the override on during the day, it will track this way, but it doesn't want to track back. So we've got the override on, so we should have something there, and we don't. Now this wire here is the main feed. So let's go between there and
there. 12.9 volts. So we've got voltage there. Okay. Now I've got the timer, as in the mains timer, set to as if it was in the evening, to go backwards. And this is the microswitch. That goes up to a microswitch up there. Okay, so we've got some diodes there. So we should have power between there and there. And that only shows, or it could be just really mucky connections, 6 odd volts, 5 volts. So maybe it's that microswitch that could be the problem. And that's right out of the weather. You know, it's sheltered by the panels and everything. There's a connection halfway up. So let's just test that. So we've got a connection there. Yeah, we've got the meter in shot. So we should have something between there and there. Right, I think we've just got some duff connections. So we need to get a piece of wire and just short that out there to there. Or undo those. So let's undo those. So I did put some grease in these before and put them together, but let's just try that. That's running now. Okay, so let's take those out, change those, and see if that makes any difference. It's always a good idea to put a drop of oil in these and a dab of grease in these holes, just to keep the water out. I think we may have found one of our problems. So let's just try this. That's running now, but it's not running now. So we've got to take, where is it? That microswitch there apart. We've got a problem. So here's the microswitch. Now one thing you got to remember is this was second hand in the mid-80s, so it's been about for a long time. So let's have a look. It could be just plain and simple dirty contacts. So that comes apart like that. I think we can take that plastic cover off to reveal the contacts. But I can't remember how they come off. Probably just as easy as that. So let's just see if we can see those contacts. So we just need to put a meter across those two to see if it's making contact. It should be making contact when it's in this position, so it should be across that one and that one. And then if we look here in the box, just zoom out a bit. If we look here in the box, it's there and there. So it could be we've got a duff contact there and there. So I need to check between there and the end of the brown and there and the end of the blue, and then between there and there. Could be that muck there is creating a resistance. So let's just clean it up. So between the blue there, well, let's go on the contact there and the blue there. That seems to be alright. And between the contact and the brown, that's fine. Okay, so on the Microswitch we should have contact between there and there, which is what we've got, and between that fork and that fork we've got contact as well. Yeah, maybe just if perhaps. I'm just going to clean those contacts up there, those forks, just to make sure we're getting a good contact, then put it back together. Okay, so I've cleaned those up and closed those up a bit. Yeah, and we'll just put this back on. There we go. And I've changed this cable for a longer cable, so let's just put that back together like that. And where did I put the Allen key? Hopefully I put it back in the box, or else it might have slipped off somewhere. Anyway, I'll just put that back together and then cut the cable and check the end. So it was worth changing the cable just to get rid of that connection. Can we see the meter? Yes. And also the cable I've used here is a lot thicker, but we still don't have a connection, which is rather disappointing. Ah, there we go. It's just after I'd put the Microswitch together. There we go, brilliant. I can put this back together now. Anyway, I've rewired it. That comes from that Microswitch now. So poke that in there and she runs. So if I just slacken that off a bit, poke that in there, quickly do the screw up, operate the Microswitch, it switches off, on, off, on, there we go. Success. Catch up with you later.